Late afternoon light slanted through high windows as Mari lowered her voice and traced her fingers along a locked iron gate in the university library. The hush felt like a living thing, thick and oppressive, pressing on her chest in greater measure the closer she stood to the forbidden wing. A single sign read, "Restricted Authorized Personnel Only," penned in a spidery script that seemed older than any other sign in the entire building. Books stacked in uneven towers on either side beckoned for attention, but it was the shadows behind that iron gate that captured her entirely. Whispers of campus legends told of a place that contained journals capable of showing your darkest regrets before you even knew them yourself. In the silence, Mari felt her heart thunder and realized she could not walk away. Curiosity had always been Mari's closest companion. She was a scholarship student with a talent for archival research, someone with a knack for discovering obscure references in ancient tomes and spinning them into compelling narratives. Her professor had recognized this quality and granted her after-hours access to the library for study. Yet, even she was explicitly warned never to set foot in the forbidden wing. No one told her exactly why. Some murmured about dangers, some about cursed pages, and some about tragedies that befell those who dared to read. But the librarians clammed up if she asked for details. That, more than anything else, stirred her inquisitive soul. Over a week of clandestine observation, Mari spied the caretaker, Edgar, sneaking an ancient key off his pocket chain and disappearing into the restricted area. He was always careful, glancing around like a man expecting a predator to pounce. Mari kept her distance and waited for the chance to follow. She was certain that, if the journals existed, she had to see them for her dissertation on historical prophecy texts. That was her pretext, anyway. But the deeper motivations of fear, excitement, and fascination glimmered beneath the surface. So, one night when the library's overhead lights dimmed, she waited in the stacks, watching Edgar's routine. He approached the gate with purposeful steps, gingerly turned the key and slipped inside. Mari was ready. She counted to 10 and crept after him, halting whenever his footsteps paused. Adrenaline pulsed through her veins. The air smelled of old parchment, dust motes swirling in the faint halo of an overhead lamp. Mari wrestled with a storm of second thoughts. Hadn't there been enough warnings? But the memory of rumors about those uncanny journals tugged at her. Still, she managed to keep her footsteps light and her breathing controlled. If she was caught, she would face academic censure, maybe worse. She rationalized that her verve for knowledge would lead to a better understanding of these ominous legends. On that singular thought, she pressed forward. Finally, Edgar stopped beside a door that looked more like the entrance to a vault than a library closet. He unlocked it, apparently unaware of Mari's presence, and slipped inside. Mari stayed close enough to see him set down a large ledger on a reading stand. The door was heavy, but she noticed it didn't latch completely behind him. Quickly, she pressed her shoulder to the crack and took a careful look. Inside was a chamber filled with long shelves, each bearing identically bound books of various colors, maroon, black, and purple, thousands of them. She had half expected random tomes compiled over centuries, but these volumes were uniform in their dimensions, forming a suspiciously well-organized host. Edgar sighed heavily and opened the ledger, muttering under his breath. He didn't lock the door behind him. The moment he disappeared deeper into the room, Mari slipped inside. She glided between the shelves, mesmerized by the near perfection of the row. The covers were uniformly worn, as if each had weathered the same unknown journey. Illegible dates in golden ink glittered along the spines, but they lacked any years she recognized. With the slightest tremor, Mari reached out and ran her fingers along one book's spine. Instantly, she felt a pulse of something like static, and she recoiled. Perhaps it was simply her own nerves, but the raw sense of something unnatural grew with each breath. She tried opening the book carefully, but the pages refused to reveal themselves under her gentle tugging. It was locked from within, nearly glued in place. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw Edgar's figure. She hid behind a shelf, heart pounding so loud she feared he could hear it. From her vantage, Mari watched as Edgar selected a specific maroon book from a high shelf. Using a small footstool, he held it reverently, pressing its cover to his chest before opening it. He sank onto a small wooden bench, the ledger lying open next to him. Mari strained to see what might appear on the pages. He turned them so slowly that the process was excruciating, as though he expected each page to deliver a verdict on his very soul. Once or twice, Mari detected him trembling. A hush blanketed the chamber, and only his ragged breathing punctured the stillness. Suddenly, Edgar closed the book with a shiver. He touched the embossed lettering on the spine, a name Mari could not read from her hiding spot, then set it aside and wrote something in the ledger. Under the low-hanging lamp, she saw his face, haunted, drawn, as though he had peered into a memory too painful to fully endure. Then he rose, returning the maroon book to the shelf. His steps were slow as he departed, carefully locking the ledger in a metal drawer. When he finally left the chamber, Mari waited. The door swung shut. She heard the click. This time, it latched. She was locked in the chamber, alone. Fear jolted through her, but she fought back panic. She reasoned if Edgar locked up without checking thoroughly, he probably assumed no one else was inside. Mari could figure out an escape route later. She busied herself rummaging for clues. She found the metal drawer that contained the ledger. A single lock prevented entry, but rummaging through her pockets, she found a paper clip. An old trick from her earlier days gave her the skill to manipulate simple locks. Within 2 tries, the clasp clicked open. The ledger was weighty, with a faint smell of burnt edges. Hastily, Mari flipped through the pages and discovered what amounted to a catalog of names. Columns of neat scrawl listed the names, each associated with a year and a title, and among them, her own name. A chill ran down her spine. The next column read Volume 7365, Ebony Binding. She had no recollection of signing up for anything like this. Did the library keep secret files on students who showed promise or curiosity for forbidden things? Unease thrummed in her veins. She scanned for more references to her professor, classmates, and saw many names she recognized. Regret of Scrutiny. Isaac Taylor, Regret of Ambition. Next to each was a volume. Part of her mind rebelled. How could there be tens of thousands of regrets carefully preserved here? Realizing her own name meant she had a volume. Mari steeled herself and approached the ebony binding section. She found a small set of black-bound journals, each adorned with an engraved plaque that glinted in the lamplight. Her heart thudded. Volume 70, 365. The plaque read her full name, though she had never told it to anyone outside of official university files. This was impossible. She felt an overwhelming compulsion to open it. A voice in her head screamed caution, but the temptation was greater. With trembling hands, Mari lifted the cover. The pages inside were blank at first. Just as she wondered if the journal might be defective, letters began to appear in swirling black script. It was like ink trickling across the paper from an invisible pen. She watched in fascinated horror, chest rising and falling in quick succession. It wrote, "You speak into the silence, seeking revelation, but what you find is the dread sealed in your destiny." Then it turned a final page on its own, presenting an entry in crisp lines describing a scene. Mari, returning to her dorm, failing to notice a missed call from her younger brother, Oscar, and ignoring repeated messages. The text detailed how, at that moment, he would experience a tragedy, and she would bear the blame for not being there when he needed her most. The journal's chilling script froze her in place. She pictured Oscar, bright-eyed, cracking jokes, relying on her advice when he felt unsure. The vision the journal delivered described him spiraling into a desperate situation, where a single phone call might have changed everything. Suddenly, tears welled up, her throat constricting painfully. She shook her head, wanting to close the journal, but her gaze was locked to the haunted lines describing her regret. This was not something that had happened yet. How could it predict that she would fail him in some crucial moment? She tried to recall if he was in danger. He seemed fine the last time they spoke. Could this journal be a trick, a twisted tradition in this place? She slammed the book shut, her heart hammered against her ribcage as she backed away from the ebony binding section. A rattling in the corridor outside startled her. Footsteps approached on the stone floor. Mari scrambled, realizing she was still locked inside. She replaced the ledger in the drawer, clicking it shut. A panicked glance around the room spotted a narrow vent near the ceiling. She dragged a stool over, climbed up, and forced open the metal grate. Squeezing her slender frame through, she made enough noise that she prayed no one outside heard. After a brief struggle, she managed to crawl along a dusty ventilation shaft that eventually led to a vent above an old reading room. With a soft thud, she landed behind a marble statue of some obscure benefactor. Quickly, she brushed herself off and raced downstairs, her mind fevered with the revelations the journal had shown her. She barely slept that night. Her phone remained clutched in her hand as she anxiously checked for any messages from Oscar. None arrived. The next morning, she called him repeatedly. She left a voicemail urging him to be safe, to call her back, not explaining the reasons, but almost pleading. Every ring that ended in silence fueled her dread. She would not allow the journal's prophecy to come true. She forced herself to ignore the gnawing question of whether her interference would cause or prevent the outcome. That morning, she visited a campus counselor under the guise of stress issues. She was too shaken to keep this to herself, but she also couldn't reveal the entire truth. She asked if the counselor had heard of any legends about a forbidden wing that shows a person's regrets. The counselor's eyes had flickered with momentary recognition before offering vague reassurances that only heightened Mari's beliefs. The legend was real, and the faculty covered it up. By dusk, no messages from Oscar. Fighting the overwhelming unease, Mari took stock of the situation. The journal's warnings typically revolved around one's own greatest regret. The caretaker, Edgar, was always in that chamber, as if he had grown addicted to reading or updating his own forewarnings. Perhaps he had his own regrets locked in that maroon volume. What if the writings in these journals formed a chain of self-fulfilling prophecies? Her rational mind told her to destroy them, to free everyone from the cycle. But the part of her enthralled by the forbidden knowledge wanted more than anything to go back and read that entire prophecy. So she returned that evening. She told herself it was for self-defense, to glean more information and stop the predicted tragedy before it happened. She sneaked past the main library desk, bypassing the security camera, using the ventilation route to enter the restricted vault again. This time, her stealth was more assured. The ebony binding section awaited like a black fortress of nightmares. She located her personal volume, heart pounding once more, but forced herself to concentrate. She opened to the last page. The words scrolled anew. Fate is sealed by neglect. Each action to avoid your regret brings you closer to it. Mari slammed the page shut, refusing to read more. The suffocating panic was rising again. She needed a plan, but that was when she sensed movement behind her. She whirled around to see Edgar standing near a tall shelf, holding his maroon tome close to his heart. His eyes were rimmed red, as if he had been reading for hours. "You shouldn't be here," he said in a trembling voice. "The journals, once you've opened your volume, you can't escape its pull." His voice was thick with sorrow, or maybe resignation. Mari clutched her own ebony binding. "This place is cursed," she gasped. "It's showing me some future regret. My brother's downfall. I won't let it happen. I'll stop it." Edgar gave her a look steeped in weary empathy. "That's what I believed when I first read mine," he murmured. "You try to avoid it like steering away from a storm, but destiny is a spiral. The more you twist from it, the deeper you swirl into its center." She had no idea what regrets haunted him, but the haunted cast of his face suggested a tragedy so profound it had consumed him. "So what do I do?" she asked, desperation lacing her words. "Sit back and let it happen?" Her tone bordered on indignation. She refused to accept the inevitability the caretaker spoke of. His fingers tightened around the journal's cover. "Some try to destroy the volumes. It always fails. The words manifest again. Others try to hide them, but the library is vigilant. You might seek to face the events head-on, but the journals seem to anticipate your every move. I stay here to monitor them, to atone for my mistakes." He bowed his head. "This chamber holds centuries of sorrow." Mari felt anger spark under her fear. "But there has to be a choice. Does it never occur to you that we could rewrite these pages? She hesitated, aware that the journals wrote themselves in supernatural script. If I changed my course, if I stayed glued to my phone, if I was always there for my brother, wouldn't that break the prophecy? She nearly pleaded for him to say yes. His weary eyes flicked to her ebony binding. Your best chance is to remain vigilant and pray that knowledge is enough. But beware, the dread can overtake you. Sometimes people create the very regrets they're trying to avoid. He turned away, gently cradling his maroon book. For a fleeting moment, Mari pitied him. Then he left, leaving the door unlatched behind him this time. She suspected he knew she would not be deterred, but the chamber felt more constricting with every second she stayed. The entire library's stifling hush seemed to swallow her as she made her exit. Outside, the night air vibrated with energy. Mari immediately dialed Oscar's number. To her immense relief, he answered on the third ring. He sounded a bit groggy but safe. She quickly insisted he text or call her if anything happened, and told him to stay in close touch. She didn't want to alarm him too much. He was only 17. He shrugged it off, but he agreed to keep her posted. She felt some measure of relief wash over her. That next day, she bombarded him with messages and calls, suspiciously vigilant. Occasionally he replied, "Chill, I'm fine," typed in teenage exasperation. Yet, Mari doggedly kept checking. The journal's prophecy said she'd ignore a crucial call. She refused. So she neglected classes, social events, even meals, ensuring she never missed a single ring from him. Days passed. Her phone remained glued to her side. And then a week later, Oscar's phone went silent for an entire evening. 10, 15 calls, all unanswered. Panic lit up Mari's mind like a flare. She felt the dread choking her as she raced across campus to her dorm room, calling him incessantly. No answer, only voicemail. She condemned herself for not traveling home sooner, for not forcing him to stay with her. Anxiety ratcheted to a high pitch, and she scoured social media, searching for any activity. Nothing. The hours dragged. She trembled at midnight, imagining the worst. Remembering the lines from the journal, she felt that creeping horror. Regret is sealed by neglect. But she had not neglected him. She had done everything in her power, right? Around dawn, the phone finally buzzed. Heart pounding, Mari answered. Oscar's voice was sobered, and in the background she heard the beep of a hospital machine. He explained that he'd been in a minor accident, driving with friends, phone lost in the chaos. He was bruised but stable. He apologized for scaring her. Mari broke down in relief, tears burning her eyes. She told him not to move until she arrived. She would take the first train out to him and make sure he was safe. Once the call ended, she pressed her phone to her chest, a new resolve burning bright. The journal's prophecy had been thwarted, she told herself. The dire event never escalated to the tragedy described. It was likely that her dogged vigilance had changed the outcome. She imagined going back to that ebony binding now, opening it and finding blank pages. The regret was undone. With heart hammered by adrenaline, Mari packed a quick bag and took a taxi to the station. The entire trip she felt delirious, with a mixture of relief and confusion. Could she truly have changed her destiny by reading it in advance? She arrived in the hospital waiting area, found Oscar in a bed, looking battered but dignified. He gave her a tired grin. A wave of gratitude and hope flooded every cell of her body. The journal was wrong. Maybe destiny could be rewritten. She stayed by his side for a few days until doctors released him. Then they traveled back to campus together. She felt safer keeping him nearby while he recovered. He insisted on trying to lighten the mood, joking about her mother-hen approach. Mari only mustered a wavering smile, unwilling to mention the supernatural library. By the time they returned, the nightmares no longer tormented her at night. She told herself she had outsmarted fate. The ebony binding would have to remain half-written and incomplete, and she was free. But her sense of relief eroded the moment she visited the library to collect some reading materials for class. One of the junior librarians quietly mentioned to Mari that the caretaker had left a note for her to visit him in the restricted wing, something about finalizing unfinished business. A lead weight dropped in her gut. She had sworn never to step inside that room again. Yet the caretaker's tone had been foreboding enough that she felt compelled to see what he wanted. She arrived after hours, as requested, weaving past shelves that felt eerily familiar under the dim glow. Edgar stood with his maroon volume open on a central table. He beckoned Mari closer, gaze full of sorrow. "You think you broke free," he said slowly. "I hoped you had. But your ebony binding has updated itself." Her skin went cold. Of course she wanted to refute him. Instead, she felt the weight of inevitability settle in her chest. She gingerly lifted her ebony binding from the shelf. The pages were no longer blank. With trembling hands, she opened to the newest entry. The words formed rapidly, as if they had waited for her presence to reveal themselves. Mari's breath caught. The journal spoke not of her brother now, but of a seemingly harmless decision she would make next week. An argument with Oscar over his independence. She would get distracted by research while he was out exploring the city. Her phone would be off. And that would be the moment he slipped away, encountering something lethal, and her regret would remain that she had not offered him the care he needed at a critical time. Mari felt a terror she had not known before. All her vigilance, all her caution, and it was still weaving new threads in the tapestry of her life. She glared at Edgar. "Why does it keep changing? I already avoided the first tragedy." He pressed his lips tight. "You overcame one regret, but the journals are relentless. Fate adjusts." His gaze flicked to his own volume. "I too avoided the initial prophecy in my youth, but the next and the next. Each time, the cost grew steeper. The regrets transformed to ensure the final outcome remains the same." Shaking, Mari whispered, "So there's no stopping it?" She wanted him to say otherwise, to give her a glimmer of hope, but the caretaker only gazed at her with pity. He suggested she leave the campus, forget the library. Some ex-students found a semblance of peace far away from these journals, but the entries had a way of chasing a person's mind, contriving scenarios that corner them into the dreaded final moment. Even if physically far, the regret might still manifest. Mari's thoughts spun. Could she incinerate her ebony binding? Attempt to destroy the library? She recalled his warning, "It always fails." But she was done being a puppet of a cursed artifact. With sudden resolve, she took a metal bookend from the table and swung it at her volume, ripping the cover. Edgar gasped, but she pressed on, smashing the spine, scattering pages. Black script flared, swirling into the air. The overhead lamps flickered. She felt a fierce heat crackle against her face, as though she had ignited an ancient grudge. Then, dark silhouettes spiraled out from the torn volume, coalescing into a funnel of black smoke. She staggered back in horror. The swirling shadows hissed and jerked, forming half-recognizable shapes. Disembodied faces twisted in silent wails. She realized these were regrets unleashed, freed from the pages, swirling through the restricted wing. Edgar stumbled away, tears leaking down his face as he gripped his own maroon book. He shouted for Mari to stop, but it was too late. She had destroyed the ebony binding, severing it physically. A final wraith of darkness swooped toward her, intangible hands clawing at her shoulders. Then it vanished, as if sucked back into the ether. A hush descended. Mari panted, holding the ruined remains of her volume in trembling hands. For a moment, everything felt still. No supernatural script remained on the cover or pages. Had she broken the cycle, or had she unleashed something worse? Edgar looked older in that moment, a sorrowful acceptance creeping over him. "It's done," he whispered. "You must live with the consequences." He cast a glance at his own maroon volume, seemingly now inert. She watched him place it back with all the precision of an exhausted watchman. Gathering her courage, Mari turned her back on the library. She walked out without speaking another word, her mind reeling from the horror. The destruction of her ebony binding felt liberating, but the ghost swirling out of it haunted her. She recalled the wails of regrets. The prophecy had not come to pass, but at what cost? In the subsequent weeks, Mari poured all of her energy into caring for Oscar, ensuring he had little reason to wander alone. Their bond was strong, yet sometimes she felt an echo, a sinister quiet at the edge of her consciousness, as though the library's dark presence still lurked. She lived in perpetual awareness, anticipating some horrific event, but the tragedy never came. Instead, a faint question remained. Had she truly escaped, or was this merely another chapter waiting to be written? One night, on a whim, she pressed her ear to the phone, listening to Oscar's easy breathing in the next room. Safe and asleep, she willed her heart to calm. The ebony binding was destroyed. She had refused to hand control of her future to a cursed volume. Whatever destiny had planned, she would face it on her own terms. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to drift toward something like peace. Then, from a forgotten corner of her mind, she recalled the swirling black silhouettes, their silent lament. The sense that hundreds more volumes existed, each containing someone's unmanifested regret, flickered through her thoughts. She wondered whether those trapped regrets could still find a home in her life or in another's. The library remained, the caretaker remained, and the centuries-old appetite of those cursed journals might never be fully sated. Perhaps only time would tell if she had truly broken free or simply torn open another gateway to dread. In the hush of the moonlit dorm, with Oscar breathing softly in the next room, and the ephemeral hush of the night pressing in, Mari resolved one thing. She would never go back to that library. Even if the promise of knowledge called to her, even if the caretaker pleaded, she had learned enough. Some secrets were meant to remain shut behind iron gates, in the silent tomb of dusts and ghosts. If fate wanted a fight, she would give it her own way, without the burdens of predictions dictating her every move. She felt a faint flutter of determination, a vow that the future, untold and uncertain as it was, belonged to her alone. At least, that was what she told herself, letting the final vibrations of dread fall away in the quiet of the night.